Well, tomorrow the Finance Minister Enoch Gogondwana to announce the measures in the medium-term budget policy statement that he will implement to try and contain what looks a little, maybe, like a fiscal crisis. From what we know, depending on which figure you look at, government has spent around 200 billion rand more than it receives. Of course, there are different ways of looking at this. But at the same time, millions of these people literally rely on social grants just to stay alive. If there are cuts to health and education, that would have a huge impact on many people. Dr. Gilad is director at the Institute for Economic Justice. Dr. Isaacs, good afternoon to you. There are many different things to look at here. Firstly, do you believe government is coming close to running out of money? Do you believe what a lot of people are calling that we're in a fiscal crisis of some kind?
Afternoon. Thanks very much. I don't believe we're at that point now. We could always reach that. We are probably have collected this year about 50 billion rand less than projected, based on the information which we have available. Obviously, we'll hear updated amount tomorrow, and that money is fairly easily accommodated through increased borrowing or increased revenue. Of course, in the medium term, it's impossible to sustain ongoing and regular revenue shortfalls.
Okay, I'm going to come to borrowing in just a moment. So what do you believe then is the right response? If we are spending more than we're getting, what should we do?
Well, we have two main choices. We can receive increased revenue, or we can spend less, right? Of course, in the sort of medium term, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the only way out of this is a credible plan to expand the economy. We have this problem because the size of the economic pie is too small. In the immediate term, I believe that there is both room for increased revenue and for a reduction in expenditure. On the increased revenue side, there is, the fall in income tax, for instance, cost us between 11 and 13 billion rand without any commensurate gain in investment. There's about 305 billion rand in tax breaks to individuals. For those earning above 750,000, we pay those people back about 83 billion rand every year. There's pools of untaxed wealth. So there are a number of avenues for increased revenue. It should be noted also that the government has a legal obligation in our constitution to provide for people's rights within available resources, and it should maximize those. On the spending side, it is correct for us to review and assess where there are wasteful, unnecessary expenditure. The issue which we've had over the last 2 months is that the National Treasury has essentially taken a unilateral and immediate approach and indiscriminate one, where it has wanted to introduce hiring freezes, budget cuts across the whole expenditure portfolio. That is not the appropriate way to ensure that we spend wisely. We need a review of expenditure and a reduction of malfunctioning programs, but at the same time we have to protect the expenditure which we all and those least fortunate rely on.
I mean, obviously, it would be ridiculous and just wrong to touch the school nutrition program, for example. There's a big temptation to borrow more money, and the President said last night, if I understood him correctly, we spend more on interest payments now than we actually do on the South African Police Service, which is an astonishing figure. The risk to that is that you just end up getting into a debt spiral. I mean, should we be looking at borrowing more money?
I think there's two key factors here. In the short term, increased borrowing for the current budget mismatches would raise our debt trajectory by about 1 to 2 percentage points. This would still put us well below the expected figures from 2020 and 2021 and the start of last year, right? And those figures were considered to by Treasury as a sustainable path, okay? So even if we made up the entire shortfall, we're not talking about, flying off the trajectory which we're on now. It's a modest increase. The second factor is that what really is at issue here is not so much the size of our borrowing, which is pretty much in line with the emerging market average, but it's expensive. And we really need to be having a policy conversation about the fact that we pay more for our borrowing than our peer countries. And there are ways of intervening to see borrowing costs fall. But borrowing costs also reflect a sense that there isn't a credible growth path, that there isn't a plan being put forward for the expansion of the economy. So, debt in and of itself is neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It's about how we utilize that, and if it is utilized in a way that can generate the conditions for its own repayment later on.
Dr. Gilad Isaacs, really appreciate the time. So much more to talk about there. The Director of the Institute for Economic Justice. Thank you. You'll see, of course, the medium-term budget policy statement live right here tomorrow from 2 o'clock in the afternoon.